goes back to 1992. I was in my office and the managing partner came down to me and said, there's this guy named Jim Miller. He wants to borrow a lot of money and expand his self-storage business. You better go down and see him. I went down to Jim's office in Ultimo, as it was then, met him. David Scanlon, Michael Tate were sitting in the background doing as they're told. And Jim asked me, what do you know about self-storage? I was honest and I said very little to nothing. And we went on from there through a 4-hour conversation, and Jim took me through his whole business, the principles and how the business operates. At the end of the conversation, Jim said, so you got it all? I said, to be honest, Jim, I got about 50% of that. He said, that's okay, come back tomorrow and we'll do it all again. So that's what we did. I think the important thing about when I think back on those discussions was Jim's commitment, and I say there's similar commitment from many of the forefathers of this industry to share knowledge and to educate people in what self-storage was about, to establish consistent management principles and make sure people understand that. I think that culture of sharing and educating participants in the industry has prevailed to today, and in fact is one of the great strengths of the industry. I remember going to a conference down at Botany Bay, Brighton, Les Sands. I think you were there. Many of the people that are still around were there, and we had a visitor from the US, and again it came down to, let's just talk about our business. Let's understand what's done in America. How can we do it better in Australia? And everyone was open-minded and willing to share. So my experience was, great. I came away feeling that I'd learned something. It wasn't recognised as an investment medium for many, many years. I can remember talking to bankers in the 90s and even early 2000s, and they said, look, it's just big warehouses with lots of short-term tenancies. In fact, it was much more sophisticated, that the cash flows were more secure than they really understood. So I think the biggest challenge was educating people outside the industry in what the strengths of the industry were, and gaining acceptance within the general investment community as self-storage being an appropriate and very sound investment product. Oh look, it provides a magnificent networking basis, conferences, meetings. I encourage all my staff to attend them. They actually get to talk to people one-to-one. Those people are involved in the day-to-day operation of facilities, facing all the problems. So you get that great forum and great education process. I think the other thing that we get out of it is some of the products that the association has been responsible for, and I'm thinking things like the Manual of Procedures. When I get a young graduate in and I want him to introduce him to what self-storage is about, I just say, here's the Manual of Procedures, go away and read that, and then we'll have a conversation. They come back and their mind is spinning, but they do have the base knowledge. It's an excellent product. When I look at the friendships I've made, they're mostly in the self-storage industry. It's quite different to many other forms of business, and certainly many other forms in the property industry. So I'm lucky that I can say, yes, I've had clients for 20 years or 30 years, but I've also had friendships for 20 and 30 years. I've had some fun adventures. I'm always entertained when I visit sites and get the managers talking about, the people that are storing, what they're storing or what they shouldn't be storing, what activities go on in self-storage facilities and individual units. But look, it is in the work we do. You find yourself in some very funny circumstances. I remember doing some work for Fort Knox Group in Queensland. In those days, they used to have guard dogs. I was down the back of the facility furiously taking notes. It was starting to get late in the afternoon, and the guy was trying to lock up, so he let the guard dogs out while I was still at the back. And I remember being pinned to a fence for about 20 minutes until he realised I was down there and called off the dogs. No injuries on that one. I remember being we're over in New Zealand, and you might remember that in New Zealand they actually have electrified outer fences, and it was a miserable, cold, wet afternoon, and again I was down the back of the facility furiously taking notes, pulled out my camera to take, that's out of focus, stepped back through things and leant against the electrified fence. Things like that happen all the time, but look, I survived, and I'm here today to say that it's been a happy experience.